Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the eTrailer Class 3 trailer hitch receiver on a 2022 Honda CR-V. And you can see it's actually pretty clean looking here because it is a hidden cross tube. And that means that the actual hitch kind of bolts up underneath, and really it's all hidden behind the bumper. So the only thing that's visible from the road is going to be the receiver itself. So that's pretty nice. You get all the utility of the hitch, but it's still going to give you a nice clean look. Now looking a little bit closer, we have a 2" by 2" receiver tube opening, and that's going to be great for a number of different accessories. A lot of them, that's kind of the standard size. So whether you're putting a ball mount, a bike rack, or even a cargo carrier on here, it shouldn't be a problem to find something that works well. Now going along with that, you're also going to have a 5/8 hitch pin hole, and that's going to be for your pin and clip to go in. Now it's important to note that the hitch does not actually come with a pin and clip, but a lot of times your accessories, when you pick those up, will come with one. Now if you're looking for something that is locking or just a different pin and clip altogether, we have plenty of options here at eTrailer, and those locking ones are really nice because when you have your accessories loaded up, you know that they're safe and they're not going to walk away in the hands of someone else. Now if you do plan on towing a trailer, you're going to need to take a look at the rolled style safety chain loops here, and these are going to be great for hooking up your standard size hook, no problem, as well as your larger clevis style, and you have plenty of clearance here. Speaking of towing, if you plan on towing with this vehicle, you need to note that the weight capacities of the hitch are going to be a decent amount, but nothing that's going to be for a super large trailer. In fact, your gross trailer weight rating is going to be 3,500 pounds, which is the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded up. You also have a tongue weight rating of 525 pounds, which is the downward pressure on the receiver tube opening. So that's going to be your suspended accessories like your bike rack or cargo carrier kind of weighing down on the hitch. Now it's important to note to check your vehicle's owner's manual to see what the vehicle is capable of and compare that with what the hitch is capable of, and take the lower of those two numbers just so you stay safe. Now just a few quick important measurements. We're going to measure from the center of the hitch pin hole to the furthest point of the rear fascia. It's coming in at about 2.5 inches. And that's important to note for some of your folding accessories. That way they don't make contact with the rear fascia of your vehicle and scratch them. But this seems to be a pretty good distance to where you shouldn't have that issue, but something to keep in mind when looking at different accessories. Now we're also going to check our ground clearance here, and it's coming in right at about 14 inches. And this is important, not because I worry about this making contact with the ground, but when you have your suspended accessories on here and you go up an incline, those can actually dip down. So just something to keep in mind when you are driving in some maybe rough terrain or going up a large hill when you have your accessories loaded up. Now, a trailer hitch is something, when you add it to the vehicle, that really opens up what you can do. It gives you a lot of real estate with potential for that bike rack or cargo carrier, and you can just really add on to the list of things that your vehicle can do by towing. So if you're interested in the hitch but worried about the install, I'm here to tell you this is a pretty simple one. It can be done in your garage or driveway, and I'm going to walk you through all the steps to make sure we get your hitch installed. So let's take a look at that install now. Our installation is going to begin by lowering our exhaust down by removing the rubber isolators from the hangers. Now before we do that, we're going to want to support the exhaust. That way it's not actually hanging down. It can cause damage further down the line. So what I'll do to actually support it is I'm just using a cam buckle strap here, and I'm just going to go across my suspension, and that way it's just going to kind of hold it up and kind of create a cradle for it. Now if you are doing this in your garage or on your driveway, you can actually use just maybe a block of wood or something. You just don't want this hanging down by itself. So just a little precautionary before we get these popped off. Now as far as getting the isolators off, they can be a little bit tricky. Something that you can do is actually put a little bit of white lithium grease, or you can use a penetrating oil or even a soap water concoction, and that's going to help that rubber kind of just slide off the hanger. So I'm going to go ahead and spray these down real quick. Now there's going to be a total of 3 that we're going to be tackling. First one is going to be right here. We have one on our driver's side as well, so that's going to be identical. And then there's also going to be one more. So as we go back, we'll see back here. So we'll go ahead and spray that down. And we're just going to be using a pry bar here you're going to want to just find a nice point of leverage, and you can actually see kind of where the hangers are welded onto that bracket. You can use that to kind of pry it off. So there's two of them on the muffler. There's just the one single one on the chassis. Whichever one comes off easiest, it's going to be fine, because doesn't really matter which side you go, but you can see here I'm able to use the muffler as leverage to kind of pry this back. So there's one side and the other. So I'll go ahead and get our other isolators removed. If you don't have a pry bar, you can actually use a long-handled flathead screwdriver. It's going to kind of work the same, but just take your time there. They may fight you a little bit, but we should be able to get these all popped off. So you can see with that last isolator, the exhaust does kind of drop down a little bit. Now I'm using cam buckle strap, which is really nice because I can actually kind of adjust this strap, and that's going to lower it down as necessary, but still keep it supported. So main thing is we're going to be putting some bolts up in the frame rail, so just making sure you have that clearance to be able to put the hitch in place. Now the hitch design actually has the crossbar kind of sitting behind the bumper here, so this underbody panel is going to need to come off, and it's pretty easy to do. There's going to be a few plastic push pins, so we have one here, a large center one, and then there's also another large one directly back from there. There's also going to be two 10mm nuts here that we'll be taking off as well. We'll get this taken off. Now these plastic push pins, they can be tricky at times. I have a panel removal tool here, and these are really nice for kind of being able to get underneath this, and once you kind of have a gap, you can kind of pry underneath the whole side of it, pop the button out, and then you can actually pop these out. Now you're going to want to hold on to these. We'll need them for reinstallation later, and these can break, so just kind of take your time, and if they do break, you can generally pick up some spare ones at an auto parts store, or we actually have performance tools here that we have replacement ones. Not a big deal if they break, but another way, if you don't have this tool, just a small little flathead here, you can kind of do the same process. Just kind of pry on the center here, little twisting motion to kind of create a gap. And as you work around, we should be able to get that center portion to pop out. And once you kind of get that gap there, you can a lot of times just pull it down with your hands, and that'll remove it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll get our other two big ones popped off just the same way, and then we'll get those 10mm off and pull this panel down. Now we are going to be doing some trimming here on our rear fascia, and this is just going to allow access for that receiver tube opening to actually come through the rear fascia. So I've gone ahead and just measured it out, and I use painter's tape just to make sure that I have a nice clean line to follow. I'm using a pair of just shears. This should go through the plastic fairly well, but if you have a Dremel or a cutting device that you prefer, you can kind of just score along here. Just make sure you don't go too far up. There's nothing behind here, but there are some models that have the hands-free lift gate, and that's going to have the actual sensor in here. So if that's the case, you're going to want to refer to the instruction manual and remove that, as well as you may need to trim that just kind of in the same fashion as this. But the instruction manual has that covered. Ours does not have that, so I'm going to go ahead and just make our cut here on the fascia. So now I'm going to go back with the file, and I'm just going to kind of clean up my edges and make these a little more even, but that's going to kind of help take any of that flashing off. So I'm going to go grab my file and we'll get this smoothed down. Now our hitch is going to mount up to our frame rail, and we're going to be putting some carriage bolts through these two holes. And the way we're going to be doing that is our fish wire technique. So in your hardware, you're going to find a wire with a coiled little spring end here, and we're going to just feed it in where we're actually going to have that stud coming through, and just kind of push it back towards the large opening in the rear of the vehicle here, and just kind of grab that with your fingers. And once you have that end pulled through, we can simply take our spacer block and you can just slide that on there and kind of just put it in the frame. We're then going to take our carriage bolt and we're just going to thread this on that coiled section. Once we have that coiled on, we're going to just simply pull this through, and a quick little jostle should get this popped into that hole. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for this one, and it's just going to be a short little journey right there. But you're going to want to keep your actual wire on until we actually have the hitch in place. It's going to make it a lot easier. Make sure that these don't push back in the frame. So with our hardware all in place, we have our fish wires hanging down. We're going to go ahead and lift our hitch in place. Now, if you need to grab an extra set of hands, by all means. I'm going to kind of lightly rest it on the exhaust because I have it supported here. And that's going to allow me to actually get our fish wires pulled through the corresponding holes. So go ahead and just feed them through. And that's going to help us align this as we raise it up. And also, when lifting it up, if we do push the actual carriage bolt up, we can kind of give these a light tug, and that's going to kind of align it back down. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to raise this into position, but I'm going to actually have to clear some stuff here. So we're going to be on the left side of this tow hook. You can see there's the bracket actually welded onto the back of this, and we'll actually be supporting that later. But when aligning this up, just keep that to the left side of this. And then what you're going to want to do is kind of peel this fascia back, and it's going to sit kind of right behind all this. There's also a metal bracket, and that's just for the plastic push pins. So just go ahead. You're going to create a little gap here for this to slide up. There we go. And it should kind of allow this to raise into position here. So I'm just going to push our hitch up. And what I'm going to do here is take our fish wire off. And I'm really going to do my best to make sure that this doesn't get pushed back in the frame. Luckily this one, if it does pop up, you'll be able to kind of get that with your fingers. But once you have the stud there, you're going to want to take your flared nut here. And we'll just get this hand tightened on this side. It's going to make it a little bit easier to hold in place, so that way we can get the other side on as well. So that'll hold there. I'm going to move over to the driver's side and do the same thing. So now that we have them hand tightened in, you don't want to tighten it down too much because you may need to actually raise this up in order to get this carriage bolt through. So you're going to see there is a little square, and this is just going to feed the carriage bolt through, hold it in place, and then we'll just take this spacer block here and put that on there and follow it up with a larger flared nut, and then we'll get this tightened down. Now I'm going to just tighten these up with an 11/16 socket. Now you don't have to go too crazy on these because we're going to go back with a torque wrench here shortly. So just to kind of snug it up to get it in place. Now this one here on the tow hook is going to be a 3/4 inch socket, and something you might want to do just for a little added tip here is this spacer block might move around, but just kind of give it a cleaner look. I'm going to just kind of hold it up to where it's going to be nice and square, and then I'll tighten it down. Next, we're just going to go back with our torque wrench to make sure that these are at the proper torque setting. And what that's going to do is make sure that there's not too much stress on the threads by over tightening, but also it's going to be nice and snug and not come loose over time. Now, there's going to be torque settings in the instruction manual that we're going to follow, and the 4 that are on the frame rail are going to be the same, but the one that's on the tow hook, you're going to want to adjust for that accordingly. Now, if you need a torque wrench, we actually have these here available at eTrailer, or you can actually rent them at an auto parts store a lot of times. But again, this is going to be an important step to make sure that it's snug. Now here's where I talked previous about trimming this out. It's going to be pretty easy to actually just take this and kind of mock it up where it was originally. This slid over the tow hook previous, so all of this area, as you can tell, will need to be opened up. So what I'm going to do is just take my shears, and while this is in place, just kind of cut along where it's too wide, and that's going to open it up, allowing us to get this back in place. So shears work pretty well here. It's kind of a fabric felt-like material, so really a pair of scissors should cut through this pretty well. Now we're going to take our underbody panel here, and we're going to just kind of slip this into place. This should be in between the plastic and that metal bracket there, so just kind of slide those in between. And then on the back side, you should be able to align those studs in the holes. So I'm going to go ahead and just take that 10mm nut and just kind of get those started to hold it in place. And then we can actually take our plastic push pins here. So we have the two larger ones. First one is going to go on the furthest forward hole here. And then we'll take the next large one, put it here. And then finally we'll get these two right here. Now we're going to get our exhaust back up in place. So we're just going to raise up here on the muffler and just try to get these hangers here lined up with the hole on the isolator. And then you can kind of just push those on. It may take a little bit of force, but if you kind of grab around the hanger and just kind of push it through, we should be able to get this up. And now we'll just go ahead and repeat for the other two isolators. So now with this last one on, if you have a strap or whatever you are supporting your exhaust with, you can go ahead and take that down. And that was a look and installation of the eTrailer Class 3 trailer hitch receiver on a 2022 Honda CR-V.